Oh, what a glorious night it is. Our first set of video notes. Ladies and gentlemen, it is so exciting to be with you. Not only tonight, it will be super exciting to be with you many nights throughout our school year. Ladies and gentlemen, before we get started with our first set of video notes, I wanted to talk about this page that you came to when you went to find your notes. Because we talked about it in class, how very dang darn important it is for you to make sure that you have taken some of your own notes first. Get that brain thinking about what we're going to talk about. So you need to have read the lesson from the book. I realize the lesson in the book is not that exciting, and looking at some of those examples that it gives can be confusing, and that is okay. But the really important thing is to read the key ideas from page 4 and 5. And not they don't have a bunch of them. Sometimes it's just on one of the 2 pages or one of the 3 pages, and sometimes there's more. But you need to read them. You need to take your own notes in your own words, drawing your own pictures, drawing your own diagrams, writing down what it is you feel you need to know. And then as I go through the notes, you can add to yours to help with your understanding. But taking your own notes does start that file that in the cabinet of your brain that will store that information and knowledge. And then as you change it, you open the file and you say, oh, well, now I understand it this way, and you put that in there. So dang darn important. So ladies and gentlemen, let's just get busy with lesson 1.1, page 4 in your book, where we are going to be with integers and absolute value. That is our topic for tonight, and you are going to apply what you learned to find the absolute value of an integer, our essential question. And it is important because we will revisit our notes tomorrow, and when we do so, we will revisit this essential question, and then we will use it to help us write our summary. And our essential question is, how can you use integers to represent real-life situations of numbers? So ladies and gentlemen, from the top of page 4, the key idea, hopefully you took some notes. And you took some notes on integers. And they were kind of inadequate, I understand that. But here we are, integers. Integers. We have a number line here, and I'm going to start talking to you about how you started to learn your numbers. When your parents first started teaching you how to talk, by telling you numbers, by saying words to you. But the first set of numbers they started telling you were the counting numbers. Sometimes we call them the natural numbers. Those numbers happen to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. ... as they continue on in that direction. The counting numbers. Well, then we have a 0 that we added to our counting numbers. That 0 adding to these counting numbers, let's label that. I want to label this. So we're going to go that way, and we're going to call this the counting numbers. And then we add a 0. This 0 makes this whole set whole numbers. Okay, these are the whole numbers. And now today, and maybe you have in the past, but we are going to add the negative numbers. These numbers are opposite our counting numbers. They're -1, -2, -3, etc. ... going backwards. And now this whole entire set, this entire thing here, counting all of the opposite, the negative numbers, counting 0 and counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. These are the set of integers. These are our integers. If you want to copy that down, great, because I'm going to erase it before I show you the next part of this slide. So you start with the counting numbers, then you added 0 and they became the whole numbers, and then you added the negatives, and we have the set of integers, which includes all the whole numbers and all the counting numbers. So, ladies and gentlemen, you also needed to learn a little bit about absolute value of an integer. And again, I hope you didn't copy all this. Basically, the absolute value of an integer is the distance between that number and 0. That's it. It's the distance from that number on a number line to 0. And of course, there is a way that we communicate that we want the absolute value of a number, and that is to use these straight vertical bars on each side of what we're talking about. And so that indicates that we are asking for the absolute value of a number. So you can see from their example, this is right from the book, the absolute value of a -4, you would start right at -4 and you would count 1, 2, 3, 4 units. 4 units to get to 0, and so that means the absolute value of a -4 is 4. And then when you ask for the absolute value of 4, again, you would now start at +4 and you would count 1, 2, 3, 4 units to get to 0. And so the absolute value of a +4 is 4. You are going to recognize that anytime you are counting distance, distance is always positive. We can't go backward in distance. There is no such thing as a negative distance. But we have integers to represent negative values. We'll talk about it as we go through. So let's do some examples, ladies and gentlemen. The first couple, we're going to use a number line to help us. And the first one is the absolute value of 5. So that I would come right over here to 5. And I would graph 5 on my number line, so then I can start counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units. 5 units to get to 0. So I know the absolute value of 5 is 5. And then we have the absolute value of -3. So I can graph -3 on my number line, and I can start counting 1, 2, 3 units. 3 units to get to 0 from -3. So the absolute value of a -3 is 3. Pretty easy when there's a number line. We're going to go without a number line because I think you're starting to pick this up. It's just the distance to 0, which if you haven't recognized, whether you're taking the absolute value of a positive number or the absolute value of a negative number, it is just that positive number. So, moving right along, we have the absolute value of -28. If you were to put that on the number line and count, you would have 28 units to get there. So the absolute value of 28 is -28. We have the absolute value of 72. Counting that number of units again, that would be 72. It is just that number written positively. Well, now we have the negative absolute value of 64. Ladies and gentlemen, here's where we're going to talk a little bit about something you need to know, and that's called order of operations. And in elementary school, you learned order of operations as PEMDAS, P-E-M-D-A-S, which you learned that to be parentheses, exponents, right? And then you had multiplication and division, whatever came first, left to right. And then you had addition and subtraction, whatever came first, left to right. We're going to change this P. This P is now going to become a G. It's going to become a G, and we're going to call it GEMDAS. Because G stands for grouping symbols. There are a whole lot of grouping symbols that you are going to start learning about that are not just parentheses. Parentheses are just one form of a grouping symbol. Absolute value bars are also a grouping symbol, which means you have to do everything inside those bars, just like you do everything inside those parentheses first, before you can do anything on the outside. So when you have the negative absolute value of 64, well, the first thing you do is order of operations, GEMDAS, those absolute value bars say, what's the absolute value of 64? Well, the absolute value of 64 is 64. That negative on the outside, that is a factor. It's like saying I have -1 times the absolute value of 64, which means the negative absolute value of 64 is -64. We can talk about it more when we get to school tomorrow. Ask some questions. So raising that up just a little bit, now I have the negative absolute value of a -87. Order of operations tells me I'm going to take the absolute value of a -87 first, and that answer is 87. And then because we have a negative on the outside, multiplying by that -1, the negative absolute value of a -87 is -87. Moving right along. Our first quick write of the night. So this would be on the left side page of your actual notebook, not written in your insert that you've just wrote those notes on. This one, on the left side, at the very top, we should already have done it in class. Part A, in your own words, well, we did in class is you wrote quick write number 1. Right underneath it, write A, and then you're going to answer A by writing in your own words a complete sentence to explain the absolute value of a number. As soon as you have that written, write a B, and you're going to write about a real life situation where one would use the absolute value of a number. And then you have C, D, and E, the absolute value of 37, the absolute value of a negative 77, and the negative absolute value of 107. Now take a hint. You might want to pause the video as you do your quick write. Now once you're done with this quick write, I want you to take a quick mental break. Go get a drink, listen to one song, go talk to your mom for a minute, go to the restroom, whatever it takes, and then come back, start that timer again, because remember, we want 30 to 45 minutes of quality work in one night. And so you start that timer again, and then you finish your notes. I will see you in just a few moments with video number 2.